Hello, my name's Rilya. I worked 2 jobs to put my sister through med school, paid her rent, her tuition, even skipped meals so she wouldn't have to. She passed, she became a doctor, then she changed her last name and told the world I didn't exist. No thank you, no mention, not even a seat at her graduation. She built her future on my sacrifices, then erased every trace of me. And when I finally spoke up, she told people I was unstable, jealous, a liar, but I kept every receipt. They told me I should be proud of her. But tell me, how do you celebrate someone who stepped on you to reach the stage? Would you stay silent? If the world only applauded the person who buried you? The first thing I noticed was how clean everything looked. The kind of clean that doesn't come from mopping, but from money. The campus lawn had been trimmed down to the millimeter, the hedges shaped into perfect curves. It was early, just after 8 a.m., but there were already people gathering inside the event center. Men in tailored suits, women in expensive dresses that whispered rather than rustled. I sat there in my old Honda, parked just far enough from the entrance to not be seen, but close enough to see through the glass wall. And there she was, Vera, standing under the spotlights in her white coat, flanked by her new world. She smiled like she belonged there. Maybe she did. I didn't move. My hands were clenched on the steering wheel, not because I was cold, but because if I let go, I didn't trust what I might do next. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just hollow. 10 years ago, I gave up my spot at community college so Vera could stay in school. She was struggling with tuition, books, and barely holding it together emotionally. I stepped in without her asking. I picked up early morning shifts at the dental clinic where I sterilized tools and answered phones. Then at night, I flipped burgers and mopped sticky diner floors while drunk college kids laughed too loud. Back then, people kept telling me, she's got potential. She just needs support. And I was the support. I never argued. I didn't need applause. I needed her to make it. Vera was always the golden one, sharp, charming, always knew what to say. I was the quiet one, the steady one. While she networked, I worked. While she took practice exams, I took on a third shift during holiday breaks. She used to say thank you. Small things, coffee left on the counter in the morning, a sticky note that said, "You rock." We had a rhythm. We shared late-night ramen on the floor of our apartment and talked about the future. But then things shifted. Gradually, I noticed the coffee stopped showing up. The sticky notes disappeared. Our conversations turned into brief nods and one-word texts. She started studying more with people I never met. Then she moved out to focus. I still paid her portion of the electric bill that month. And now, here I was, sitting in a car that needed new brakes, wearing a coat from Goodwill, watching the woman I sacrificed everything for walk across a stage without a single glance back. She didn't even save me a seat. I hadn't received a formal invitation. My friend at the dental clinic forwarded it to me after she saw Vera listed as a keynote recipient in the alumni newsletter. The invite said, "Reserved seating for key donors and guests." I guess the $38,720 I poured into her education over the years didn't make me a donor. Just a footnote. She was radiant under the lights, confident, powerful. The applause felt like static in my ears. I could see her through the glass, clear, untouchable. She hugged the dean, posed for photos. Her name echoed in the hallway like a bell. And me? I was still on the outside, literally and metaphorically. I wasn't angry, not really. But I started doing math in my head, the kind of math people like me do when rent is 2 days late and groceries are getting low. I counted back through the years, how many overtime hours I took on, how many student loan payments I made under her name because she couldn't qualify. I remembered using my emergency savings to cover her textbooks while I skipped a dentist appointment because I couldn't afford both. I funded her dream, and somewhere along the way, I'd erased my own. The funny thing is, I don't think she meant to cut me out entirely, not at first, but Vera was always good at shedding skin when she needed to fit a new mold. And when the medical world demanded prestige, there was no room for the sister who worked night shifts and wore Payless shoes. I stared through the glass like I was watching a movie, one I had financed, cast, and directed, only to be left off the credits. A group of young med students walked past my car, laughing, their coats flapping in the wind. One of them looked over, caught my eye for a second, and looked away like I was a stranger, or maybe someone lost. I was both. I glanced at the time, almost noon. I had to be at work by 1:30. I couldn't afford to be late. My supervisor had warned me last week after I missed a shift covering for someone else. But still, I didn't drive off. I kept watching until the crowd inside began to thin. The lights dimmed. Vera stood at the edge of the platform, posing for one last photo. Her smile was wide, practiced. And that's when it hit me. She didn't forget me. She erased me. There's a difference. Forgetting implies something accidental, a moment of absent-mindedness. But erasing, that takes intent, that takes decision. I finally put the car in gear and pulled away. At the stoplight, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Tired eyes, hair tied back in a loose bun, jaw clenched. "She didn't forget me," I said aloud, barely recognizing my own voice. "She erased me." And that sentence, it did something. It cracked open something in me that had been sealed for years. The part that thought loyalty guaranteed love. The part that believed sacrifice would be remembered. As the light turned green, I didn't feel better. But I felt awake. By the time I got home, the traffic had thickened, and the afternoon sun had already begun slipping behind the trees. I turned off the ignition and just sat there in the car, watching the neighbors' wind chimes dance in the breeze. That sentence from earlier was still bouncing around inside me, echoing off the walls of my skull like it had been waiting 10 years to be spoken. She didn't forget me. She erased me. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt like remembering a truth I had once known, then buried because it hurt too much to hold, like realizing a childhood memory was actually a lie. I carried it inside as I walked through the front door of my apartment, flicked on the kitchen light, and dropped my purse onto the chipped Formica counter. The place smelled faintly of burnt coffee and lemon cleaning spray. I didn't bother changing clothes, just kicked off my shoes, microwaved a leftover burrito, and sat down with a cup of stale coffee. I was chewing on autopilot, thinking about nothing in particular, when I noticed the small white envelope tucked between an old water bill and a coupon flyer on the table. No return address, but the handwriting, slanted, confident, familiar, was Vera's. Inside was a thank you card, one of those pre-printed types with gold foil letters that said, "To those who helped me shine." On the inside, in Vera's handwriting, it read, "Jane, thank you for believing in me when no one else did." Jane. I stared at that name like it was a punch to the face. Who the hell was Jane? Not me. That was for sure. I must have read it 3 times before I laughed. A short, breathless, almost wheezing laugh. Not because it was funny, because my body didn't know what else to do. Jane? I looked around my tiny living room as if someone else might be there to witness this, as if someone could verify that I was not, in fact, losing my grip on reality. There was no Jane in our lives, never had been. No mentor named Jane, no landlord named Jane. I was the one who lent Vera money when her check bounced. I was the one who signed as her emergency contact for 6 years. I was the one who sat in the ER with her when she had a panic attack before her first board exam. But Vera had written a thank you note to Jane. I slid the card back into the envelope, placed it on the counter, and stared at it like it was some kind of weapon. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, frozen in a moment I didn't want but couldn't avoid. Later that evening, I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Vera's contact. I don't even know what I was planning to say. Maybe I wasn't planning to say anything at all. I just needed to hear her voice. Or maybe I wanted to catch her in a lie, hear her hesitate and scramble when I said, "Who's Jane?" But I never made the call. I hung up before the first ring. Instead, I sent a text. 1 word. "Congrats." She didn't reply. An hour later, I was scrolling through Facebook while waiting for my laundry cycle to finish. And there it was. A new post on Vera's feed. A photo of her standing next to her framed diploma, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "To those who supported me through this journey, you know who you are." That one. That felt like a scalpel. I locked my phone and placed its screen down on the coffee table. Sat there for a long time, letting the silence fill every corner of the room. I didn't need her to tag me. I didn't need a parade. But I wasn't invisible. I was there. I was the unpaid chauffeur, the overnight therapist, the temp nurse, the bank. I was the reason she even had a journey. And she knew it. She just didn't want anyone else to. Later that week, a local article started circulating online. One of those feel-good pieces about perseverance. A friend from work forwarded it to me with a smiley face and a "Is this your sister?" in the subject line. The headline read, "From Struggle to Success, Dr. Vera Calderon's Journey to Medicine." I skimmed the first few paragraphs numb until my eyes hit a quote that made me stop breathing. As the first in my family to attend college, I knew I had to be my own fuel. There were no safety nets, no shortcuts, just grit. I reread that quote twice, 3 times. First in disbelief, then in fury, then in something colder than both. First in her family. She hadn't just left me out, she'd rewritten me out, deleted me like a typo. I dropped the phone onto the couch and stood up too fast. My legs felt weak, my stomach sick. I paced, counted the steps between the wall and the window. 8, back and forth, 8 again. Then I sat down and opened my laptop. Wrote an email. Just a simple one. Subject: wow. Message: first in the family, huh? Then I deleted it. I opened my phone's voice recorder, hit record. I spoke for 23 minutes straight. About the time I bought her first lab coat. About the time I watched her walk into her MCAT exam with my backpack on her shoulder because hers had torn. About the nights I stayed up with her when she had panic attacks, and I hummed the lullaby our grandmother used to sing when we were little. When I finished, I sat in silence. Then I hit delete. Not because I forgave her, but because I knew now. It wasn't about her forgetting. It was about her pretending I never existed. This wasn't memory loss. It was narrative control. I was the messy part of her story, the chapter that didn't fit the brand. The truth was inconvenient, unmarketable. So she cut it out. And that night, in my own kitchen, with the sound of my washer spinning in the background and the street lamp flickering outside, I picked up my favorite mug, the one Vera gave me 6 years ago, the one that said "World's Best Sister," and I threw it against the floor. It shattered instantly. I didn't flinch. I looked at the mess for a long time. Part of me expected to cry, but I didn't. Instead, I took the broom from the closet and swept up the pieces slowly, one by one. There was something strangely satisfying about it. The control of it, the finality. I wasn't broken. I was clearing space. I didn't lose her. I lost the illusion of her, and that illusion had cost me 10 years, and now it was demanding silence too. I don't remember falling asleep that night. One minute I was sitting on the edge of my couch, surrounded by the silence I'd gotten used to, and the next, sunlight was bleeding through the blinds like it was trying to remind me that life goes on, whether or not you're ready. I moved through the kitchen slowly, muscle memory guiding me as I filled the kettle, opened the fridge, closed it again without taking anything out. That phrase from the night before still hung in the air like smoke I couldn't clear. I didn't lose her. I lost the illusion of her. It stayed with me as I sifted through a stack of mail I'd been ignoring. Most of it was junk, local ads, a bill I'd already paid. But one piece made me pause. A flyer, glossy and polished, from a private medical group in South Carolina. A recruitment pitch, it looked like. I was about to toss it when my eye caught the name printed dead center in bold serif letters. Dr. Vera Calderon, MD. I stared at it for a beat too long. She hadn't just changed cities. She'd changed her entire skin. I flipped the page over. There was her picture, chin tilted confidently upward, white coat perfectly pressed, eyes bright with ambition. Her bio said she was a trailblazer from humble beginnings, committed to breaking generational cycles. Humble beginnings. Was that code for me? I read it again. Nowhere did it mention our hometown. No reference to the college I sacrificed for her to attend. Not even a mention of being the first doctor in a working-class family. It was like she had been planted in her career, fully grown from the dirt of her own myth. I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out my laptop. My fingers moved fast, like they were chasing something they already knew existed. I typed her name into a search bar and hit enter. Page after page came up. Interviews, academic journal articles, mentions in medical newsletters. Her name was everywhere. Vera Calderon, never Vera Santiago, no maiden name in parentheses, no hyphen. No history. I opened one article after another. I scanned for any sign of connection, a quote about her background, even a vague reference to a sister who believed in her. There was nothing. It wasn't just that she'd rewritten her story, she'd redacted me from the margins. I caught myself refreshing the page like maybe a new detail would appear, something I missed. But the facts remained the same. I wasn't just forgotten. I was scrubbed out, like an inconvenient statistic. And somehow that was worse than the thank you card to Jane. That was worse than the Facebook post. This was clinical, cold, a calculated erasure. I leaned back in the chair, numb. Suddenly, a memory hit me. Not loud or dramatic, but subtle, like a breeze brushing against a scar you'd forgotten was there. I was 15. Our parents were in the middle of what felt like their 50th argument that month. Divorce was hanging in the air, thick and inevitable. I remember hiding in the hallway while Vera sat on her bed, writing in her journal. Back then, she used to let me read it. Only the parts she didn't lock with the tiny brass key. That day, the page was open. I crept in quietly after she left for school. It was a single sentence, circled twice. I'll never give up the Santiago name. It's the only part of me that's real. I had believed her. I'd clung to that sentence like it was a promise, like it meant that no matter where we went or what we became, we'd always be tied together by something no one could take away. Now, that promise was just another scrap of fiction she left behind. The tears didn't come, not immediately. It was more like a weight settling into my chest, not sharp enough to scream, but heavy enough to leave a mark. I closed the laptop and walked over to the bookshelf, pulling out an old photo album from our childhood. The leather was cracked, the corners curling. I flipped through the pages, birthdays, holidays, blurry school plays. She was in every picture. So was I. The final page held a snapshot of us in front of our grandmother's house, arms linked, wearing matching hand-me-down jackets and crooked smiles. We were maybe 8 and 11. I could still hear the sound of our laughter, shrill and genuine, rising over the clatter of pots and the scent of burnt rice. I placed the album down and got in my car. The drive to our mother's house was quiet. No music, just the rhythm of tires on asphalt and the occasional blink of a turn signal. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun had started its descent, casting a golden hue over the porch steps. She was outside, as always, sipping iced tea and chatting with the neighbor across the fence. I stayed in the car for a moment, watching. "My daughter's a doctor now," she said with pride, not realizing I could hear her from the street. "She made it all on her own." My stomach clenched. The neighbor gasped, impressed. "That's incredible. You must be so proud." "Oh, I am," my mother replied. "She's always been ambitious, never needed anyone to hold her hand." I opened the door slowly, careful not to slam it. She turned when she heard the creak. Her smile faltered but returned quickly, though less certain this time. "Hey, sweetheart," she said casually. "Didn't expect you today." "I was in the neighborhood," I lied. The neighbor waved awkwardly and excused herself. My mother stood, dusting off her slacks like I was someone who needed polite presentation. We went inside. The living room hadn't changed in years. Same beige carpet, same doily-covered armchairs. The faint scent of lavender and old wood lingered. I sat down, not quite settling in. "Nice to see you," she said, making her way to the kitchen. "Want some tea?" "Sure." She poured 2 glasses. We sat in silence for a while, sipping. Finally, I broke it. "I heard what you said outside." She blinked, then looked down at her glass. "What did I say?" "That Vera made it all on her own, that she never needed anyone." She didn't respond. "Was I not here for 10 years?" I asked. "Did I imagine covering her rent, or helping her through panic attacks, or—" "I didn't mean it like that," she cut in. You've always been the quiet one. Vera's just out there, you know? Out there, like ambition made erasure acceptable, like volume mattered more than truth. I guess I just thought you'd remember, I said. She didn't meet my eyes. Later, when I got home, I sat at my desk and pulled out my ID. Santiago, my last name, our last name. I stared at it and felt disconnected, like it belonged to someone else now, like I was carrying around a name nobody claimed anymore. I walked to the closet, reached up to the top shelf, and pulled down an old box labeled Keepsakes. Inside was our childhood scrapbook, stickers on the cover, doodles on the edges, pages filled with construction paper, photos, scotch tape. I opened to the middle and stared at a page titled Sisters Forever. I didn't hesitate. I walked to the sink, lit a match, and burned it, not out of hate, but because grief sometimes looks like letting go of something beautiful that never really existed the way you remembered. I watched the flame eat away the edges, curling them inward like a leaf in autumn. Ash floated into the air, soft and final. She was never written into my story, but she was etched into mine, and when I saw her face again, I wasn't even sure she'd say my name. When I saw her again, it was by accident, or at least it started that way. I'd picked up an extra catering shift through a friend. She said the tips would be good, and I needed the cash. The envelope showed up 2 days later. Black ink on thick, cream-colored stock, the kind of paper that whispers money before you even read a word. I opened it without thinking, just expecting instructions and a floor plan. Instead, my eyes locked onto the bolded headline, Blake Hart Rising Women in Medicine, Gala honoring Dr. Vera Calderon. I stood there at the kitchen counter, the paper trembling in my hands. I reread the line, even traced the letters with my thumb, as if maybe I'd hallucinated it. No, it was her, Vera. Being honored, again. And I was going to be there, serving drinks. I didn't tell anyone. Not my coworker who handed me the job. Not the agency rep who confirmed my availability. I packed my uniform in silence, pressed the collar, polished my shoes, and braided my hair tight. I didn't want to go, but some part of me needed to, like watching a train wreck you already know the ending to, but you can't tear your eyes away. By the time I arrived, the event space was already humming. Chandeliers cast golden light over linen-covered tables. A jazz quartet played in the corner. The scent of roasted lamb and truffle oil drifted in waves through the ballroom. I checked in with the event manager, who barely looked up before waving me toward the kitchen. I slid into my blazer, adjusted the tray straps on my arm, and walked out into the crowd like I was invisible. Maybe I was. The room was filled with people who spoke in lowered tones and smiled like they were trying to sell something, even when they weren't. I moved quietly, offering champagne flutes and sparkling water, nodding politely, keeping my eyes down. Then I saw her. She was standing near the stage, in a deep blue dress that hugged her figure just right. Her hair was swept into a bun so precise it looked sculpted. She laughed, loud, confident, and touched the elbow of a silver-haired man in a navy suit. He leaned in as she gestured toward the large projection screen behind them. I took one step backward before I caught myself. My fingers tightened around the tray. No one noticed me, not even her. Especially not her. Then the slideshow began. The screen flickered, displaying a carefully curated series of images. Vera in her white coat, Vera volunteering at a clinic, Vera speaking to a classroom of high school girls. There was no sign of me, not in the background, not in the captions, not even in the early photos. One image made me pause. Our old living room couch. I recognized the pillow I'd sewn myself. But only one person was in the frame. Vera. She'd cropped me out. My stomach dropped, but I kept moving. Champagne to the left. Appetizers to the right. Smile when spoken to. Pretend this doesn't feel like watching someone steal your house and redecorate it like you were never there. I circled the room once, then twice. By the third lap, my eyes couldn't stop drifting back to her. At one point, she glanced my way. I thought maybe there'd be a flicker of recognition, even just a twitch of the mouth. But instead, she leaned toward the nurse standing beside her and whispered something. Seconds later, a security guard approached me. Quiet, firm. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. I blinked. I'm working. His expression didn't shift. You've been identified as a guest who wasn't properly registered. We just need to verify a few things. I glanced at Vera. She was looking straight through me. Please, the guard said again. His tone wasn't unkind, but it wasn't optional either. The room had quieted just enough for people to turn, just enough for someone to whisper, "She must have snuck in." And just like that, I was escorted out. No shouting, no resistance, just shame wrapped in silence. Back in the kitchen, I removed my apron with shaking fingers and handed it off to a confused line cook. I didn't explain, I didn't need to. I drove home in the dark, headlights streaking the highway like ghosts passing me by. 3 days later, I went to my mother's house. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day she usually spent rearranging knickknacks and pretending everything was fine. I hadn't been there in a while. Not since the last phone call ended in her saying, "Well, you know how Vera gets." The door was unlocked, as always. I stepped inside quietly, the scent of potpourri and pine sol greeting me like a reminder of childhood. "Mom?" I called out. She appeared from the hallway, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Oh, you didn't call. Thought I'd surprise you." She smiled, a little too tightly. "Well, I'm glad you're here." We made small talk for a while. She offered me lemonade, which I declined. Then I saw it. The photo wall. It used to be filled with family moments, me and Vera at the lake, Christmases, birthdays. But now, a new frame took center place, a large one, professionally printed. It was Vera. Standing beside her boyfriend, their golden retriever at her feet, arms around our mother. My spot was gone, literally. I had been in that photo, once. It had been taken at the same BBQ. I remembered laughing too hard to stand straight. They'd cropped me out. I walked closer, stared at the glossy frame, and said nothing. My mother came up beside me. "Oh, that? Well, you didn't come to the last few get-togethers. I didn't want to assume you wanted to be in it." I turned to look at her. "You didn't want to assume I was still your daughter?" She blinked, fumbled for something to say, then settled on, "It's just a picture, Rilya." No, it wasn't. And we both knew it. I left before the lemonade sweated through the glass. I didn't slam the door, didn't raise my voice, but something inside me shifted on the drive back. A quiet rearranging. I didn't feel hollow anymore. I felt focused. Let them crop me out. Let them erase the captions, delete the old files, rewrite the scripts. They thought silence meant surrender. But I wasn't done. If I was going to be invisible, then I'd make damn sure I became unforgettable. The next time she saw me, I wasn't holding a tray. I was holding proof. I didn't wait long after the gala. That kind of humiliation doesn't just sit still inside you. It moves. It mutates. It pushes you toward action, even if you're not entirely sure where that action will lead. The next morning, I was ironing my only decent button-down, folding the sleeves with a precision I hadn't applied to anything in years. Not since I used to steam Vera's interview clothes while she crammed for her organic chem exams. Now, I wasn't preparing her for anything. I was preparing myself. I got to the hospital just before visiting hours began. The parking garage was already full, so I had to circle twice before I found a spot wedged between two oversized SUVs. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. No lipstick, no earrings, just clean and presentable. My badge from the catering shift was still in my purse. I almost laughed. I used to think showing up in a uniform meant I had nothing to prove. Now I knew better. The front desk nurse gave me a polite nod as I approached. "Hi," I said, calmly. "I'm here to leave a message for Dr. Vera Calderon." She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. "Name?" "Rilya Santiago." There was a pause. "I'll let her know." I stepped aside and waited, standing near a display about heart health that hadn't been updated since Valentine's Day. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. I was about to leave when I saw her. Vera came around the corner, clipboard in hand, her posture perfect. She looked surprised to see me, not alarmed, just momentarily caught off guard. Then her expression reset into that same tight-lipped smile she wore at the gala. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice even, cold. I didn't blink. "I paid for you to be here. I think that earns me a hallway." She glanced at the nurses' station. One of them was watching, curious. The air changed. "I'm working," she said, a little sharper now. "This isn't the time or place." I stepped closer, but kept my voice low. "You keep saying that. Isn't it funny how the right time never seems to come?" Vera exhaled sharply through her nose and motioned to a nearby nurse. "She needs to be escorted." Before the nurse could take a step, I raised my voice, not shouting, just clear enough to carry, "One day, you'll have to say my name again, and when you do, I'll have receipts." That stopped her. The nurse hesitated. A few patients glanced up from their chairs in the waiting area. Vera's lips parted like she was about to respond, but she didn't. She just turned on her heel and walked away. I left without being forced. By the time I got home, I was still shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. It was the kind of clarity that burns like antiseptic. It stings before it heals. I was halfway through making a pot of coffee when my phone buzzed. Unknown sender. The email subject read, "You don't know me, but you should." I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I opened it. "Hi, Rilia, you don't know me well. I'm Jovi, Vera's old roommate. We met once, years ago. I doubt you remember. I've stayed quiet for a long time. Probably too long. But after what happened at the gala, I can't anymore. You deserve to know that you're not crazy. She's been erasing you deliberately. Attached are some screenshots. Read them when you're ready. No signature. Just the email address and a single attachment labeled Truth Zip. I downloaded it and braced myself. Inside were 4 screenshots of text messages between Vera and Jovi. They weren't dated, but the context was clear. Vera referred to me as the mule, as in, she's useful, carries everything, doesn't complain, like a damn mule. Another message, she's not even ambitious, doesn't get it. But hey, at least she's reliable. Reliable. That word echoed in my head like a bullet in an empty hallway. I sat down, staring at the screen, jaw clenched. I wasn't even angry yet, just stunned, numb. I think some part of me had always known, but seeing it, typed out in plain English, like I was a tool instead of a person, that was something else entirely. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten. I recognized the penmanship immediately, rounded letters, slightly slanted right. Jovi. Rilia, I was there when she cried to you over grades. I was there when you brought her food during finals. I was there when she deleted you from the slideshow because she said, "It's cleaner without her in it." I didn't speak up then. I should have. I'm speaking now. You were never the problem. She just needed a version of success that didn't include anyone who reminded her where she came from. I read it once, then again, then a third time. This wasn't a letter. It was a permission slip, a release, a validation that I wasn't imagining it all. It was the first time in years someone told me I mattered, and meant it. That night, I pulled out a cardboard box from the back of my closet. Inside was a decade's worth of evidence: receipts, rent agreements, tuition stubs, bank transfers. I found old sticky notes from Vera, the ones she used to leave me before tests. "Thanks for covering dinner. Again. Love you. Don't forget to pay the water bill. Couldn't do this without you." I laid them out on the table like puzzle pieces. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like building a record. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to document everything. Every hour I worked so she could study. Every late fee I covered. Every promise I held for her until she could hold her own. I spent the weekend printing copies, highlighting dates, cross-referencing transactions, organizing every folder by year, by category, by consequence. It wasn't rage that kept me up late. It was resolve. On Monday morning, I walked to the post office and slipped a padded envelope into the outgoing slot. It was addressed to Vera's apartment. Inside were copies of the files. On top, a single note in my handwriting. "You still have time to tell the truth." After that, I walked back to my car slowly, the sun warm on my face. It didn't feel like closure, not yet, but it felt like the beginning of something bigger than silence. Some people don't see mercy as a gift. They see it as a weakness. Mercy is a beautiful thing until it's placed in the hands of someone who sees it as a weakness. A week had passed since I mailed Vera the folder. Receipts, leases, bank transfers, her own handwriting, thanking me. The evidence wasn't threatening, it was factual. My final olive branch, really. I didn't ask for an apology. I didn't ask for anything. Just gave her a window to come clean on her own terms, privately. She didn't take it. Instead, she doubled down. I first saw it on LinkedIn. A post Vera had written the same day my package was likely delivered. No one handed me anything. I built this life from the ground up. It had already gotten hundreds of likes and a string of comments. Inspirational. Self-made queen. You're the example our daughters need. Each one felt like sandpaper on a wound. I closed the browser without reacting. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I was done letting her see me bleed. 2 days later, I got a message from Jovi. Hey, I submitted your name as my guest for the Women of Excellence Gala next week. Vera's being honored again. Thought you should be in the room. This time, not in a uniform. I didn't respond right away. It wasn't hesitation. It was calculation. Timing matters. If I'd shown up too soon, it would have looked desperate. Too late, and she'd spin her version of events uncontested. But this was just right. The night of the gala, I wore a black dress I'd found at a resale shop downtown. Simple, sleek, not a single brand name in sight. My hair was pulled back, lips bare, folder tucked under one arm like it belonged there. The event was held in a high-rise ballroom, floor-to-ceiling windows, chandeliers that probably cost more than my yearly income. I arrived just as guests were being seated. Jovi met me at the entrance, gave my hand a light squeeze. You okay? I will be, she nodded. I told the host you're with me. He won't stop you if it gets to that. I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. Inside, the space was buzzing. Waiters in white gloves, string quartet playing something too elegant to recognize. Vera stood near the podium, smiling for a photographer, shaking hands like she'd been born into that world. When her eyes met mine, there was the briefest flash of recognition, followed immediately by composure. She turned back to her conversation without pause. I took my seat. Jovi sat beside me. The lights dimmed. A voice announced the keynote. Dr. Vera Calderon, recipient of this year's Rising Legacy Award for Excellence in Public Health and Community Empowerment. She stepped up to the mic like she'd been waiting her whole life for that moment. There were days I didn't think I'd make it, she began, but I built myself from scratch. No shortcuts, no handouts, just determination, hard work, and vision. The applause was immediate. Cameras flashed, smiles widened. Even the event host was nodding, clearly impressed. But I stood, calmly, slowly, without theatrics. I walked forward. The host took a step toward me, but Jovi leaned in and said something low in his ear. Whatever it was made him stop cold. I climbed the 2 stairs to the stage, not facing Vera, facing the audience. I'm sorry to interrupt, I said. My voice didn't shake. I just wanted to return something that was left behind. I opened the folder. One by one, I removed the documents, tuition checks in my name, lease agreements from the apartment she lived in during school, the letter from her dean thanking me for supporting her financially during her final semester. And then, the last page, a yellow post-it note, in her handwriting. Thanks for believing in me. I couldn't do this without you. V. I held it up for the cameras. The silence was instant. You could hear the string quartet stop tuning. You could hear forks touch plates. And then, a voice from the back, soft, confused. She's her sister? I didn't need to respond. Vera hadn't moved. Her hands were still on the podium, gripping the sides like she might fall over. I turned to her, not with anger, not even with pity, just with truth. This was never about applause, I said. It was about truth. Then I stepped down, folder still in hand. No one tried to stop me. No one dared. The cameras turned, Not toward Vera, toward me. I didn't look back. Outside, the night air was cool, quiet. I stood near the valet stand, waiting for the car Jovi had arranged. My hands were steady, my breathing even. She'd spent years building a story without me in it, and I had just reminded the world that it wasn't hers to write alone. But the story didn't end with silence. The storm began with a DM. I was halfway through reheating leftovers the next day when the message came in. No subject line, just a preview that read, "You don't know me, but..." I almost deleted it. I'd had enough unsolicited feedback from strangers since the gala. But something about the sender name, Drew M., felt oddly familiar. I opened it. "Hi, Rilia. We haven't met, but I intern at Blakehart. I thought you should know. Vera's telling people you faked everything. Said you're jealous, that you've been unstable for years. She's showing them screenshots of your messages. I don't know you, but I saw your folder at the event. I don't believe her. Just thought you deserved to know." Drew attached was a photo of a conversation, one Vera had apparently forwarded. It looked edited, obviously so. Text bubbles misaligned, timestamps weird. She'd told the firm I was blackmailing her, that I was bitter she'd outgrown me. Bitterness? If this was bitterness, it was because I had poured the best years of my life into holding her up, and she'd repaid me by standing on my neck. I closed the fridge and sat down at the kitchen table, trying to steady my breath. She wasn't just trying to ignore me now, she was actively discrediting me. And that was her final mistake. I didn't scream, didn't post a rebuttal. I opened my laptop, pulled up a folder I hadn't touched since her third year of med school. Inside it was the original draft of a paper she'd submitted for a legal ethics course, a required part of her curriculum before her residency interviews. She'd been drowning that semester. I remembered the night clearly, her sobbing into my sweatshirt on the couch, muttering, "I can't fail this. If I fail this, I don't get placed." I stayed up with her until 3 a.m., helping her build a structure for the argument, digging through legal precedents I barely understood. She fell asleep. I kept working. The draft was in my Google Docs, under my account. The tracked edits were time-stamped, metadata intact. My email attached to every revision. I gathered everything. The draft, the screenshots from Drew, Jovi's handwritten letter, financial records. I compiled it all into a clean PDF and sent it to the law review board with a short factual note. To whom it may concern, attached is documentation regarding possible academic misrepresentation by Dr. Vera Calderon. I have included the original file metadata for your review. Sincerely, Rilia Santiago. I CC'd Vera's firm, and then I closed the laptop and went outside. It was unusually still that afternoon, clouds low, windless. I sat on the porch steps and stared at the sidewalk, not thinking anything in particular, just waiting. 3 days later, the response came, formal, cold. "Dear Ms. Santiago, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We have initiated an internal review process. Due to the nature of the materials provided, Dr. Calderon's academic record has been flagged for further investigation. We appreciate your discretion during this process." That same day, I received an anonymous email from someone inside the firm. The subject line read, "She's off the panel." The message was simple. Everything stopped today. No more interviews. HR closed her calendar. She hasn't been seen in the office since Monday. I didn't reply, but I did log back into LinkedIn. Her self-made post had been taken down. In its place was silence, no updates, no celebrations. And then I saw it. Under an old post about her being a first-generation success story, someone had commented, "Didn't she use someone else's work to get in?" It had no likes, no replies, just sat there. I didn't write it, but I didn't report it either. That evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but instinct won out. "Hello?" Her voice was unsteady. "Rilia, what's going on?" "With?" "Vera. People are asking questions. I got a call from someone at the church asking why she's not listed as a speaker anymore." I waited. "She said you were behind this." I didn't sigh. I didn't explain. "I told the truth," I said plainly. "That's what's going on." A pause, then more softly. Why now? Because I finally stopped hoping she'd do it herself. We didn't speak much after that. The next morning, I took a walk through the park. It had rained overnight, so the path was slick and the trees looked like they'd been washed clean. There were no birds out, just the occasional dog walker and a jogger with headphones in. My phone buzzed again. It was Jovi. "They're pulling her from cases," the message read. "HR had a meeting. Nothing public yet, but she's not listed on any internal docs this week. It's happening." I stared at the screen. I should have felt triumphant, but I didn't. I felt still. That night, I sat on the patio with a blanket around my shoulders, a mug of tea in my hands. The stars were faint, clouds hanging just enough to blur them. But I looked up anyway. "She did this," I whispered. Not bitter, not gleeful, just stating the fact. She wrote this ending herself. It wasn't about ruining her. That had never been the point. It was about reclaiming a name she had buried to polish her own. But I still hadn't heard the last word, and it came from the person I least expected. I wasn't expecting to hear from Carter. It had been months since I'd seen him. Last time was that brief, polite nod across the hospital hallway before everything started unraveling. He'd always struck me as one of those men who smiled with his whole face but never gave anything away. So when his name lit up my screen late that Saturday morning, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity answered for me. "Hey, Relia?" His voice was cautious, almost embarrassed. "Yes? I know this is out of the blue, but can we talk?" There was a pause between us, the kind that holds 1,000 unspoken sentences. Then I said, "You already called. You might as well start." He exhaled, slow and unsure. "I didn't know she was still married when we started seeing each other. She told me you two were estranged, that you'd been unstable for a while, that you were angry she made it out and you didn't." I didn't say anything. I just listened. "She told me you tried to ruin her, that you were obsessed with tearing her down," he continued. "But then I saw what you put on that stage." I didn't interrupt. I could tell this wasn't about seeking forgiveness. It was a confession. "I believed her for a while," he said. "I wanted to, because it made my life easier. But after the gala, after seeing that folder," his voice cracked a little. "She trashed my apartment that night," he said. "Burned a photo. The one you framed. The one of you two as kids at the fair." I remembered that photo. I had mailed it to her when she first got into residency. She'd never mentioned it again. "She didn't even try to lie," he went on. "She just said, 'You're the next rung,' like I was a step she had to stand on to get to the next level." My throat tightened. "What do you want me to say, Carter?" "I already told HR. I gave them everything. Screenshots, emails. I'm done pretending. You didn't deserve any of that." For a long moment, I didn't speak. Then I laughed. Short, bitter, but real. The kind of laugh that doesn't ask permission. "You didn't owe me anything," I said. "But you gave me something back anyway." He was quiet. "Good luck," I added, and hung up. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, letting the silence settle around me like dust. Then I walked over to the sink, turned on the faucet, and washed my hands. There was nothing on them, but somehow, it felt like something had come off. 2 weeks later, I got an email from the community clinic. They were holding their annual gathering and wanted to honor women who had quietly shaped the lives of others. Jovi had submitted my name. I didn't answer right away. I reread the email 4 times before even considering it. Me, honored. For years, I had been the background, the scaffolding, the girl behind the curtain. And now, someone wanted to put my name in lights. Not because I fought for it, but because I had held the weight when no one else did. The event was held in a modest community hall, nothing like the grand galas Vera had floated through. Folding chairs, homemade flyers, a fruit punch bowl with too much ginger ale and not enough fruit. I sat near the back, fingers folded in my lap, heart hammering louder than the microphone feedback. When they called my name, I walked slowly to the front. My heels echoed against the tile floor. My dress was simple. My words were quiet. Sometimes the world only sees the one on stage, I said, my voice steady. But someone built that stage. I was that someone. Silence. Then applause. Not polite, not forced, real. And I didn't need Vera's name to be on the banner to feel seen. I didn't need her to clap. I didn't need her at all. She felt it, though. Even if she didn't see it happen, I knew, because 2 days later, her name disappeared from the board of directors of a medical scholarship foundation. A quiet press release said she'd stepped down to focus on personal matters. Blakehart didn't fire her. Not officially, but she stopped being invited to the luncheons. Her speaking engagements dried up. Friends stopped tagging her in photos. She wasn't canceled, just receded. Once the applause stops, people notice who's still standing. A week passed, then 2. And then it came. A text. From her. "Do you still have the pen you gave me?" I stared at it for a long time. That pen had been a gift, years ago. I'd engraved her initials on it before her first interview. She carried it for years, or pretended to. My thumbs hovered over the screen. Then I typed, "No, I gave it to a real doctor." I didn't wait for a response. I locked my phone, placed it face down on the table, and went outside to water my plants. The sun was low, the soil dry. I moved slowly, pressing the nozzle just enough to dampen the dirt but not flood it. The mint leaves brushed against my arm. The lavender swayed gently in the breeze. That was the end of it, not with a bang, not with a dramatic speech, just a woman watering her garden with no more weight to carry. The storm was over, but not everything had healed. The message from Vera stayed unread in my inbox for a full day. I'd already seen the preview. 3 words. You win. I didn't click it. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. Nothing she could offer that I hadn't already reclaimed for myself. It wasn't about victory. It never was. The moment I stopped needing her acknowledgement was the moment I became whole. All that time, I thought I was waiting for her to apologize, to name me, to remember me. I was really waiting to remember myself. That afternoon, I was doing dishes when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail, not from Vera, from Marianne. Her voice was softer than I remembered, older, slower. "Hi, sweetheart, I made carrot cake. Thought you might want a slice. You were always the only one who appreciated the raisins. No pressure, just thought of you." I stood at the sink, water still running over my hands, and let that voicemail play twice. Then I turned off the faucet. It took me about an hour to decide. Not because I was unsure, just cautious. Wounds that have just started to close shouldn't be poked for sport. But this wasn't about Vera, and Marianne had once been mine too. I drove across town, the windows down just enough to let the spring air in. By the time I pulled up to the familiar house, the front yard was full. Lawn chairs, cousins I hadn't seen in years, paper plates balanced on laps. Someone was manning the grill. Music floated out from the garage, something classic with a beat. I hesitated at the curb, then took a breath and stepped out of the car. Marianne saw me before anyone else. She lit up. "There she is," she said, arms wide. "Come on, baby, I saved you the corner piece." I walked through the gate slowly, unsure if I was still an outsider. But the moment I crossed the patio, someone called out my name, my full name. "Rilya, I thought that was you." It was Cousin Marcus. His wife waved. Their teenage daughter, Ava, looked at me curiously. "You're the one who helped Aunt Vera become a doctor, right?" I paused, smiled. "I was part of the story," I said. That was enough. Inside, the kitchen was just as I remembered. Fridge covered in magnets, a slightly crooked painting of sunflowers above the sink. Marianne sliced me a piece of carrot cake and slid it onto a chipped floral plate. "I never stopped making this," she said, handing me a fork. "You're the only one who didn't complain about the raisins." I smiled and took a bite. It tasted exactly like forgiveness. Later, while the house buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, Marianne pulled me aside. "I told her not to forget you," she said softly. "I told her not to confuse ambition with amnesia." I looked at her, and she reached into a drawer by the stove. Out came a small shoebox. She opened it slowly, revealing a collection of things I thought had been lost to time. Birthday cards, old snapshots, the sticky notes I used to leave on the fridge. "I never threw these away," she said. "Because you mattered, even when she acted like you didn't." My throat tightened. "You were never the shadow, sweetheart," she whispered. "You were the spine." She hugged me tight, and for a moment I let myself lean in. That night, after the dishes were cleared and goodbyes were exchanged, I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. I parked by the lake near my apartment, took off my shoes, and walked barefoot along the path. The water was calm, barely rippling. Streetlights reflected off the surface like dim constellations. I let myself think of Vera, not with bitterness, not even sadness, just quiet detachment. You can love someone and still know they can't come back from what they did. I whispered goodbye, not to her, but to the version of myself that had waited too long for her to look back. When I got home, I noticed a new email. From her. Just 3 words. "You win." I didn't reply, because it wasn't about winning. It was about no longer being erased. A year later, I was invited to speak at a vocational high school for their senior career panel. Most of the students were first generation. Some were in foster care. Some were already working part-time jobs to help their families. The topic they gave me was invisible labor, real impact. I stood behind a plain wooden podium in a windowless cafeteria and looked out at faces full of possibility and exhaustion. I took a breath. "I'm not famous," I said. "You won't find my name on any walls. But you've seen the people I've helped. You've clapped for them. You've posted about them. I've been behind the curtain, holding the rope so someone else could rise." I paused, let it settle. You don't need to be on the cover of a magazine to matter. You just have to know you built something real. They clapped, not out of obligation, but out of recognition. Afterward, a girl with chipped blue nail polish and braids down her back lingered by the door. "That's the first time someone made me feel seen," she said. I smiled and placed my hand gently over my heart. "You are." And finally, I saw myself too. Sometimes the loudest victories are the quietest ones, the ones where no one claps, but you finally breathe. This wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was about reclaiming your voice when someone else tries to rewrite your worth. Have you ever been the one who held everything together, only to be left out of the picture? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe. There are more real, raw, human stories coming your way.